All right. Welcome everyone. Since this is recorded, I'll start to talk. We'll kind of give everyone a couple minutes to start entering the room. Really excited to have a conversation with you guys today. Got a really great group. Why don't you guys let us know where you're coming from in the chat? This doesn't matter to the people who aren't here yet, but if you're not here, this is recorded, so you'll find that out. And then you can tell your friends who missed it if you liked it that we will be hosting this recording on our YouTube and also sharing it on social media. And all of our previous revenue management roundtable sessions are available on the Wheelhouse YouTube. Lots of great conversations, and even though we're getting deeper and deeper in the year, it's really interesting to hear what folks have to say. All right, welcome, Costa Rica, Victoria. Where's everyone else coming from today? I think there's a few conferences going on too, so we'll see. We'll see how many people make it. Scottsdale. We got some folks in Arizona here as well. Austin. Hi, Donna. Good to see you. Hi, John. Okaloosa Island. I've heard that word from clients, but I'm not exactly clear where it is. Hey, Randy. You're in Dallas today, huh? There's a great ramen restaurant called Tay On. You should go there. It's in downtown. It's phenomenal. Okay, I'm gonna give it like 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll kind of get started. Let people kind of come in. I'm gonna link the playlist to the other revenue management roundtables in the chat. So if you want to go back and listen to some of what the other panelists have said throughout the year, pretty interesting. This is our 6th session, so we've been doing this for, we do it every like 4 to 6 weeks. So most of the year here, you get a pretty good perspective on how revenue managers have been changing their thinking about what's going on this year. Okay, so why don't we just kind of jump in, and we'll start with introductions. Tom, would you like to start us out?
Yeah, sure. Tom Lyons, head of revenue for Costco. Been in the industry for over 25 years now, and been through all the good stuff and some of the downturns too. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Doug?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Doug Truitt. I'm the head of commercial for Romy, properties in South Florida as well as New Orleans. But I've been in the industry for about 7-8 years in the vacation rental space and about 20 years in the hospitality space. So,
perfect. Thanks, Doug. Joel?
I'm Joel Meyer, and I'm from Hodnett Cooper Vacation Rentals, and I've been with Hodnett Cooper just about 3 years now. Prior to that, I'd been in the hotel business for about 30 years, and we have about 300 units. I think I perhaps am one of the newest people to really doing this. And the one thing I can say for people that are learning how to do revenue management is every day you do it, you do learn more. And after a year, you're feeling much better about things, and you find out how much you don't know, et cetera, et cetera. But it really does take a little while to get there, but it's worth it.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. And Henry?
Hi, my name is Henry Carell. I'm the revenue manager here at Goodnight Stay. Our major markets are Arizona and Nashville. We have about 400 properties between the two. But yeah, I've been doing this for about 6 years, been revenue managing for about 5, started in the weeds, doing field work, kind of seeing the whole business from the ground up when I was in college. So got a unique perspective on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Henry. And my name is John DeRelay. I'm the head of revenue management with Wheelhouse. Get an opportunity to work with people all over the country, talk to them about how to implement their revenue strategies, and excited to have another revenue management roundtable. If you guys haven't been to one of our roundtables before, it's just kind of an open forum conversation with revenue managers in the space. A bunch of our friends have gotten used to at conferences just hearing what other people are doing, and you learn a lot just by hearing the specific things revenue managers are doing, even if you're not in the same market or have a very different portfolio. So today, what we're going to talk about is really, it's the end of September. Summer's over. That's high season for most people, although some of you will have winter high seasons. We're looking at often a lot of shoulder seasons in the fall, a lot of changes this summer, and we're also thinking about how we're going to start budgeting for 2024. So let's just start out with if you guys could tell us a little bit about, how you consider the summer to went, how you consider the summer went. What are some things you did this summer? Like, did you have to make some changes? How did your revenue strategy evolve? And also, just when you're starting out, let us know how big your portfolios are so people get an idea. And maybe we can start with Doug this time.
Sure, yeah. I think most of us have seen a lot of the reports and stuff out there on the data recently. I think Key Data does a really good job of their monthly review, and they did that one for July and August, and it's it was tough. Occupancy was tough across the board in the US. At Romy, we have about little over 500 units, and we're in South Florida, primarily Miami, Brickell and Miami Beach area, as well as New Orleans and the CBD there. I think some of the things that we really tackled is we really responded and answered well to some of the supply issues that were being really heavily hit in the South Florida area, by really trying to dominate some market share in terms of occupancy. Really try not to be too stubborn and resistant to keep our rates super high, like historically. And answering that kind of, I think, helped us to lengthen our booking window, get a little bit more base built up ahead of time, which helped us to feel a little bit more confident about what we were going into, like into the month for the month kind of situations. So yeah, I think overall we did a lot better than we expected to. Still some year-over-year declines, obviously, but definitely not as bad as we anticipated from what had been kind of happening. I think we also saw a lot of price sensitivity and resistance. A lot of folks were shopping more extensively from various channels. We saw our direct channel actually get a really good increase that we haven't seen in a long time. So yeah, that'd be my two cents of how the summer went and what strategies we kind of put in place.
Perfect. Anyone else want to jump in?
I can jump in. Going off the price sensitivity, a big thing with us was so in Nashville, summer is usually a high season, July and August. This year we were seeing lower than expected occupancy, lower than expected ADR, and where we really tried to emphasize there and in Arizona's summer was our fees. We wanted to make sure our fees weren't too high above the competition. We knew that was affecting us not only in the algorithm, but then when people decide to book, our conversion rate. So we were really focusing on getting those fees down, even taking some of the fees off, just so that we could get bookings, because a little bit of something's a lot better than nothing. And then focusing on long-term rates, talking with owners, getting those to where they're comfortable with what we can advertise, and then implementing as many weekly last-minute discounts, that sort of thing.
I'll let everyone go around the horn, and then I'll ask a couple follow-up questions. I know, Tom, you wanted to talk quite a bit about fees on our last conversation we had together. How have things been going for your team, though?
Yeah, so we're Costco. We have 55 locations. We have about 6,000 properties altogether. So we get a taste of a lot of different destinations and locations, which is great. A real short booking window still. We saw last year 33% of the bookings were within 14 days in US. We started to see an increase first quarter. So we thought that increase would continue. That actually in May started to decrease again. So there was a lot of short-term bookings in a lot of our locations. Again, every location is different, so I'm going to kind of generalize some of this. What we did see in a lot of markets, actually the coastal markets, especially if anyone's on, we saw those markets, not us in general, but those markets in late June, July, some of August, they ran actually a higher occupancy this year in the market. Examples like 88 to 81, but they ran about 20 to 25% less in ADR, which overall decreased revenue over year. So I think what happened in some of those markets, is the market maybe overreacted 90, 120 days out on pace. They're down, so they're going to take rate down a little bit more. And what happened was demand really came in late. So if you're in some of those markets, I would encourage you to look at your pace, your booking windows from this year, making sure you don't make some of those same, I wouldn't say mistakes, but opportunities to really try to increase that rate. Some good news, of course, I know we touched on a little bit about supply in general. Last year we saw supply go up 70%. July, we saw supply year over year go down about 20 to 25%. And we know supply has a heavy effect on everything we do, including room types, bed types, occupancy, pricing, etc. Some good news we are seeing the holiday season this year. This is something we're seeing in a lot of locations, and going into 2024, that first quarter, including US, not just Costco. We're seeing some rate increases. For example, December overall in the US about 5.8%. We see that reflection a little higher with Costco. And then in January, we're seeing some nice rate increases. And again, it's not every location, this is just overall, but we are seeing some nice rate increases. So there's some good news and some bad news. We still continue to see some occupancy decline, which overall is affecting RevPAR. If we can hold on to a rate, that's the great thing. Some markets, I realize there's just too much supply to hold on to rate. But again, those booking windows still in some markets that we call them extended seasons now, there's booking windows are real tight, 1 to 14 days to start booking up.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And Joel, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, my neck of the woods is St. Simons Island, Georgia. And we have, as I mentioned before, we have about 300 units. And it's a oceanfront island. A lot of people didn't even know there was an island on off the coast of Georgia. But it's sort of wild. I don't know how Tom does it. I don't know how he keeps track of all these places all over, because just for my one little island, I have a rough enough time. However, it was different this past year than it had been, and it's showing the same going forward into next year. This past year in January, February, and March, we just did incredibly well. We were probably 30% ahead of what we've been the previous year. And right now, we're tracking about 25% ahead of that. So at some point, the number is going to turn into 100, and I can't say that anymore. The other side of it, though, is the summer, we booked very well in advance, and then there was like nothing. It just was about at a standstill. So we did lower rates. We did a couple of specials. We ended up doing better in June than we had the previous year. And July and August was a big drop. But then right now for September, we're going to end up about 20% ahead of last September. So the things that I can bring out of that was we needed to be flexible in our rates. Even when it got, even as it was still like 2 months out, you'd normally say, it's okay, let's hold on to a little bit more. We just thought, hey, we're already ahead. Let's just take what we can. And who knows how that's going to work out for this coming year. Again, the numbers are really good for the upcoming year. July, not so much, but just about every other month it is. So amazingly, the occupancies are higher. The average rate is staying about the same.
That's pretty interesting, Joel, because it kind of counteracts some of what other folks have been saying. What do you think has caused your portfolio to be able to be so far ahead? Like, what in your rate strategy, when you think in comparison to what maybe the market is doing, is different about your portfolio?
Since it is such a finite area, I think we're getting people that are saying, hey, I'm going to book again for next year. I know I want to come. We have so much repeat business. It's like, I know I want to go back. I know I want to go to the same place. Let's book it now so we can sort of check that off our list. And it works great. And I mean, at one point for July, we were ahead by 20%. But then all of a sudden, just got to 12%, 8%, 2%. And the line I kept using was, yes, well, we've already sold all those that we would have been ahead had we used it otherwise. But I really do feel it's just the people wanting to come back. And that goes to service. We don't talk about service a whole lot in these type of conversations, but that if the product is up there and the service is right, the people will pay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you guys tend to be a little bit more conservative on rate increases and premiums far in advance, and it seems does that seem to be working pretty well for you guys? You have you push that early booking window and get stuff on the books, because like you said, the short booking window seems to be still pretty unreliable. You just have
You're
less
exactly
to sell.
right. A really quick story, a bit unorthodox, it's quick, is when I was a kid, my older brother and I went and bought Rolling Stones tickets. And here's how long ago it was, they were $10 a piece. And we each got 6. I sold mine immediately. I kept 2 and sold the others for $75 a pair. So I got $150. My brother held on to his, and he was going to sell for $100 a piece. He ended up selling them for $5 a piece. I obviously remember that experience. And so, I'm not going to set it and forget it, but also I'm not going to just keep going for the stuff.
Yeah, I think that gives us a good question for kind of everyone else. Because Tom, you brought up the kind of short booking window too, and you also talked about like looking at your data at the beginning of the quarter and the end. How did your guys's rate strategy change between Q1 and Q3? And what does that maybe mean for us going into next year? And anyone can jump in who wants, or I can call on someone.
Yeah, I can start that. I think as far as the difference in rate strategy between Q1, Q3, I think was really kind of leaning on the understanding of the macro environment of what we saw changing. One of the big things that we noticed in, I think it was predominantly like Q2, was specifically in Miami, in that Miami-Dade County, there was a 20% increase in supply year over year. And that didn't even, that's just short-term rentals. That doesn't take into consideration hotels or anything else, because the hotels started coming back awake. Basically, started coming alive from their COVID, their COVID coma, as I like to call it. So you had compounding factors that were happening that were really making the booking windows a lot shorter. It was showing that we were being a little bit too high and too stubborn with what we were doing. And so as we got into Q3, we started saying, you know what, we need to not hold ourselves at such a high standard, and let's just start building the base up and create those booking windows to be a little bit longer, so we have a little bit more confidence to play around with stuff when we get closer to the shorter term to do stuff. Because as we all know, and people on this call listening to it, I mean, you get inside 30 days and you start stressing. You start making some really, really egregious changes sometimes when you don't see stuff picking up. And if you can minimize that kind of volatility of what you're doing there, I think it's going to help. But that was what our essentially our strategy was, is we kind of looked at things. We also looked at other pieces on demand. We looked at like throughput in Miami International Airport, and some of the big airports actually have free public data for you guys to go look at, and you should, because it can help you see some year-over-year changes in the amount of throughput to the airports that will actually help you dictate a little bit of supply or a little bit of demand that's happening. And for example, in Miami, we saw a 20% increase in vacation rental supply year over year, but we only saw 2.5% increase in demand in throughput to Miami International Airport. So traveler demand is still technically up, but the supply really outweighed that demand, making everybody's ADRs get diluted and then fight for share and occupancy.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Doug. Sorry,
saw
Henry,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah. At the end of 2022, we started seeing the supply increase, especially in Arizona. It was booming. And then a big indicator that I looked at in both markets with supply increase was asking rates, average asking rates. Year over year, people were asking the same average asking rates through the year, and in some cases they were even asking higher, obviously because these people kind of bought at the peak of the market, so they expected to get X amount in return on their investment. So seeing that, our game plan going into 2023 was, we got to hit our goals per home, per market, but also be conservative where we aren't trying to get premiums unless it's like Phoenix Open in Arizona or CMA Fest in Nashville, where homeowners kind of expect to have a premium there. we were being more conservative. We're like, let's go for occupancy over ADR, get that base business further out. Because the other thing too is owners love seeing the calendars full. And if we can show them the data that backs up why the numbers are what they are, but they're still hitting their goals, they just might not be getting the 2021 numbers, 2022 numbers. That was kind of our game plan going into it. And then even into this next year, I'm seeing supply kind of level out in Arizona, but Nashville is still increasing. And Nashville, I'm not sure if you guys are too familiar with it, but it's very sectioned off with demand. The Gulch area is seeing higher ADRs than we've ever seen, but everything on the outskirts is where developers are building those 60 to 70 unit buildings or complexes. And our units that kind of border those are the ones that we're having trouble with getting booked, because they're all just tall and skinny, 4-bed, 4-bath. But another way we've been able to try to mitigate that is creating combo units. So basically taking 2 townhomes, advertising it as one. And that's actually proven to bring in more revenue at a higher rate than if they were booked individually. And they book up a lot of weekdays, which has been huge for us. It's brought in a lot of corporate companies come in. They'll run up like a 4-unit side by side, and they'll pay 20 to 30% more than if they booked them individually.
Probably stretches out your booking window too.
Definitely does. Yeah, it definitely does.
Oh yeah.
And gives us that base.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Sorry,
well, I was gonna say, but yeah, through this year, that was my theory. And we were down in Arizona on ADR slightly. Our occupancy was higher, but the RevPAR compared to the market and like kind of units, we ended up on top and beating. So it's kind of nice at the end of it too, to be able to go back to owners and show them this strategy did bring in more revenue. You're not getting, the nightly rates you want, but you're bringing more revenue in than the average competitor, which is, and like I said, full calendars is the name of the game. It's for keeping owners on board.
awesome. So we've got 2 folks who told us they projected more conservatively this year. We got Doug, who told us they became more conservative, and then used some data to back it up. Tom, what were you doing? You were looking at that data early.
A man with all kinds of different hats depending on the market. So it's crazy. I was all you guys together, there was a lot of different strategies we do. We'll have a tendency, with Q3. We like, again, we've talked about this before, we like to do a lot of length of stay pricing. So if your base minimum's a 2-night, 90, 120, 240 days out, we'll play around with 3 to 7 pricing with different price points on 3-night, 4-night, 5-night, 6-night, 7-night, to more of an extreme. Maybe try to hold on a little bit to the 2-night base pricing, maybe a little here and there, weekday, etc., and try to increase RevPAR altogether. So there's demand coming in, for the 2-night base minimum, and then there's demand not as high, of course, for 3, not as high for 4, 5, not as high, 6, 7. So having different price points for all those length to stay, to try to salvage somewhat of rate when possible, and then knowing that when you get into a booking window, since it's short term in a lot of locations, your booking window usually for the short term is not going to be those 4, 5, 6s. It's going to be more that base to 3 nights. So that really worked well for us this year. In a lot of our markets, we did lead the markets, from key data and LSI data. In markets, example, the market was like 3.6. We were close to 5 to 4.9, and then had a nice ADR on the 1, 2 to 3 nights higher than them. So it effectively works. So there's some things, there's tricks you can do with that helped out in some markets. And again, not every market's the same, but it seemed to work really well for us.
Yeah, this is just a quick follow-up. How are you operationalizing that? I know for a lot of people that's really difficult to actually implement because of the channels or their software partners. What channels is that going out to, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, it goes out to all, for us, it goes out to all channels. So we're firm believers in brand, rate integrity on channels. So it does push out to all channels at those different lengths of stay. And then if we want, again, if we want to do, let's just say we have a 3 as base, but we'll take 2 nights at 30% more, 35% more, or something like that, even 20% more, just to get a little rate increase. And then, setting up your strategies, like if your base is 3 nights for 4th of July, you might have 2 at like 75% more, et cetera. So yeah, we're fortunate it does go out to all channels. Just having we really try to watch those price points. We really talk about what our average length of stay is per unit, and look at that and what the rate is per nightly rate, per night, 2 night, 3 night, 4 night.
Yeah. That's a interesting question too, I think, which is how do you determine your kind of like base length of stay? Do you do that by market, and is it or room type within market, or do you just standardize it across all of your portfolio?
Yeah. So no, very strategic actually. So again, we know the 3 to 5 bedroom or probably 4 plus bedrooms, and 3's a little outlier in itself. Having different price points and different length of stay for those bedroom types, and the 1s and 2s, you have a different type of length of stay base minimum for those. And then based on season, based on your market, there's a lot of great reports today that we can, transparent, et cetera. We can identify our competitors, how many are doing 1 night, how many doing 2, how many doing 3. So we can take a look at that data and come up with what we think would be the best base. Generally, I'm a big proponent of not jeopardizing demand. What I mean by that is, if I could take a 1 night and I'm getting 80% more than it would be for the 2, take it. Demand's demand. Have every opportunity to try to get that demand. Now, on some night, it might mess up your weekends, so you got to be careful with that. But really try to get as much demand. Don't limit yourself on your base length of stay unless it's like holidays, et cetera.
That makes sense.
I was going to ask a question just for, the 3 of you guys outside of myself, because I'm curious, but how, one thing that we're struggling with, that we're thinking about, is like what we did last year isn't really necessarily the same strategy this year. It feels like we were able to ramp things up because the demand was willing to pay more. There was still some of that COVID pent up, money and funds that people were willing to pay those higher rates and all that other stuff. And that transcended to, in my opinion, to like fees, additional guest fees, other aspects that it was like there. And now it seems like there might be some resistance to some of that stuff with that price sensitivity. Have you guys done anything with regards to like additional guest fees, or do you use additional guest fees? And how do you layer that into like your rate planning and rate setting? Because obviously that doesn't come at the front. It comes, at the checkout, and even right, like booking.com, it'll come once you add your guests before the checkout. But like, do you guys, the 3 of you guys, have any feedback on that?
Probably take that because John knows I'm into fees now. So, so there's 2 ways to look at it. First off, one strategy we look at very closely at every one of our locations is cancellation. Okay, we'll kind of start there and I'll go into fees. So really looking at your cancellation terms. Okay, if your window has changed to a short booking window and you have a real strict cancellation 30-60 days out, you might need to take a hard look at that and maybe change it, because even if they do cancel, your probability of factor of getting that
wider funnel
is high, right? So really looking at that, because that is one of the top 3 booking decisions customers are making today if the cancellation is flexible. And really at every location, we really monitor that. We get with owners, and our communication with owners is twofold. Believe it or not, they can get a higher ADR from it. Even if you're more flexible, you can actually increase your rate more, and your occupancy increases, of course. On the fees, because, and I said this before, customers value price in the rate. They'll look at that as more of an experience, but customers don't value the fees. So what we try to do is there's a percent fit, out there, your fees shouldn't be 15% to 20% more than the room rate. Okay. So what we try to do is we look at a baseline of putting those fees into fees. And if it's over that baseline, we can put it into the rate. So it's not over that, because we know there's thresholds for guests that will not book your property because that fee percentage is too high. I hope that answers your question, but we look at this very closely.
Yeah.
Really clever. Like, so you guys are evaluating it because you have this concept of like base minimum length of stay. You can evaluate like, okay, hey, we're going to charge all these fees, but we need to determine if we actually need to show them as fees or if they need to be in the room rate, because it's going to change the way the user views the value proposition of the reservation.
Absolutely.
There's a breaking point.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want surprises when we're pricing. So we want to know what those fees are. So we'll know percent wise what we're pricing. So when we're evaluating our competitors, we kind of take that in consideration then. Yeah.
Yeah. Henry, do you want to speak to fees too? Because you said you guys, as part of your strategy this year, really were reviewing the competitiveness of your fees. I'm interested to hear what you guys actually did, how you evaluated that. Fee evaluations are difficult sometimes, so I'm just curious how that was all approached for your team.
It depended on unit size in each market. Higher fees are going to affect a 1-bedroom unit. It's going to be like 50% of the stay over a larger, mansion that we have maybe in Arizona. And it was basically, my thought process with it was people don't want to see more line items. And also if they see cleaning fees that are not like anything compared to the comps, then that's going to turn them away too. So a big part of it was going by each unit type and just making sure like our cleaning fees were in line, because if we're in line or a little bit under, that's kind of our thought process with they're going to choose us over the competitor, not necessarily taking it away or putting it into the nightly rate, because then things kind of get sticky with that because we take our management fee out of the nightly rate. And then that's just a whole, I'm sure accounting wouldn't appreciate it too much, but it's really making sure that we're being competitive with the market and the units around whatever subject unit we're looking at. And it was really big with our smaller units, like in Nashville, those buildings that I've talked to you about. We had one fee, and I showed our team basically that we would have to price ourselves 25% underneath the competition to be the same total for the stay. And then in turn, it would show that the competitors made 33% more in RevPAR at the end of the year if it booked exactly perfect, like, you know what I mean? So kind of as an example. And then so that kind of made everyone reevaluate the fees. And then we're like, okay, well, and then the other thing too is each channel factors in fees in their search algorithm. So not having those too crazy high, they started putting more emphasis on that in the search algorithm. So we really wanted to take a look at that, because we were seeing that our homes were priced at nightly rate competitively. They're nice homes compared to everything else, but for some reason they weren't getting booked compared to their competitors. So that's one of the ways that I was looking at it. And then you also have reviews, all that sort of thing. But just with fees, it was really being competitive with the fees and making sure that we weren't that outlier that turned someone off, because our cleaning fee is $100 over someone else's. We had to revisit all of that, and we're actually still readjusting it now.
That makes sense. That's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that continues, because Airbnb really is making the push to take that into account. I don't know that other channels care as much. It'll be interesting to see what VRBO does in response to Airbnb. Joel, does Hodnett Cooper, how do you guys think about your fees? Have you looked at them all this year? Has that been part of your strategy?
Well, we certainly have, and we actually did something a bit unorthodox for me, to do something counterintuitive to what others are. We actually did some value added. We have and it gets a little complicated on the overall, but for the guest, it's like, okay, if you rent this unit, you get, this much in beach rental equipment, bikes, things like that, and they're delivered right to your unit, et cetera, for your stay. And we added a little bit onto the rate, but what we're looking for is people saying, hey, these guys have, we get more value from this place. Again, as can't remember who mentioned it, that the room rate, let's call it the unit rate that's an experience. Okay, but the other rates aren't. And this really is the experience. And so we're looking at this next year, them saying, hey, we got that last year, let's go to this place again. So that has helped. Another thing that really, and it's going a little bit off, but we picked up 10% more units. We picked up 30 more units this past year. We have a couple of good people at going out and getting unit owners, but that definitely helps. It may not help on the rev par, but it sure does help on the revenue line. And that's and so I use those at different times, whichever one I need at a certain point.
You're pulling the curtain aside, Joel.
Sleight of hand.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting because I do think you said it's counterintuitive, but it's very much in line with what Tom said, which is if the fees don't contribute to the value proposition, you have to be really careful about how they might hinder it. But if it is a value add, there is service or experience related to the fee, you actually can push revenue through that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have
When
you
you
guys-
do that, sorry,
Sorry,
Doug,
man.
I was
You
just
go.
going to ask, when you do that and you evaluate revenue with your team, do you include that in revenue? Because a lot of us just look at room rental revenue when we do revenue management statistics, but since that is a value add fee, do you actually segment your fees in terms of when you're looking at performance?
Yes, but it isn't, and it's not exactly this way, but it's almost like a marketing fee more than anything else, because it is getting people to stay with us versus, if it was apples to apples.
Totally.
I was gonna say if you guys haven't, so Airbnb, there was an article that just came out about Airbnb and some of their stuff they were talking about they're doing with the verifications and some of the lowering of fees and all these things they're talking about doing. So clearly, to your point, John, like there is some movement from Airbnb to try and do that. But also one thing I don't know that's getting a lot of light or talked about was Vrbo, with them going to be starting to charge more for cancellations on host cancellations within certain realms and the values. So I think there is a little bit of tug and play between the two platforms and trying to address something around fees in their algorithms and like either kind of the carrot stick approach, right, on how they're going to deal with it, which definitely I think to the point of talking about fees with revenue management is more about the conversion generators, like rather than it is like the pricing side, but there is a consideration for it. So it's like, how do we all navigate that with them kind of tugging at the strings?
Yeah. Let me know, anyone's welcome to kind of chime in on this. I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit to what's coming up. A lot of us, I think Doug and Joel have really strong spring, and then maybe I think Joel really strong summer. Tom, you've got properties everywhere. Henry, yours is kind of split. You have like spring, summer, high season, but you also have a low season in the summer in Arizona. So as we enter what's going to be shoulder and low season for pretty much everyone but ski markets, what kind of was going on in the low season as people's kind of shifted to the perspective of, oh, we're in a down market now? How did that actually affect your low season? And what do we think, what are you guys who are coming into a low season expecting to have to do in your revenue strategy to deal with fall and winter?
Stay underneath competitors' asking rates per unit type. If people are out there looking, they're going to book whatever they think they're going to get the best value for in whatever group type they're looking for. And if you stay underneath the average asking rate, your home's going to be the most attractive, given reviews are the same. I know that's a big indicator too. But also during the low season too, we really push owners to make updates to their homes. We have our OSMs reach out, and we have some case studies done on improvements that people have made to their homes and kind of a return on investment from that. But it's definitely staying underneath the market asking rate, and then also we let all of our owners know kind of what's going to be coming, to not expect, maybe you might not be able to cover your mortgage this month, but we'll make up for it in the higher months because seasonality.
That cash flow piece is important, I think, when dealing with owners, that a lot of companies overlook. I've talked to a lot of owners who, you just hear it when they buy real estate, they think about it in annual terms, where they're like, oh yeah, it is going to be a 350 RevPAR, but that means it's like $600 in this season and like $75 in this season. And so they don't understand, especially like independent owners, they may not understand the cash flow implications, which is like, you actually have to have money saved up for this season because you're not going to make your mortgage. And making sure you let anyone who only has one home, is new to the industry, making sure they know that is really important, because if they don't, and you're performing to market, but they're underwater, they could be really upset with you, even though it's not necessarily your fault. Tom, kind of the same question is Henry. How did the kind of perception of the down market affect your markets that were in a low season this summer? What did you do differently with them?
Yeah, for sure. So, depending on like Arizona, Scottsdale, you have a lot of 30-day homes, you have set weekly homes, you have daily homes, having a real defined strategy for each of those. Again, making sure that, we're priced competitively to our competitors, taking full advantage of any type of special promotion, either on Vrbo or Expedia, with last minute discounts on Airbnb, even some seasonal early birds for summer, and low season for some of those. Just making sure you do have some promotions. Some of our promotions we could do in the descriptions, book with us, get a $25, book on with Airbnb, get a gift card, etc. Just kind of setting yourself above your competition. The one thing I'm fortunate of doing, well, maybe not fortunate, I look at a lot of comp sets, right? I'm looking at a lot of units, and I have the privilege of looking at a lot of competitors that are on Airbnb and Vrbo, looking at description photos, and I can see the plus and minuses. So understanding, coming up with at least some type of competitive edges, even in down season, even though demand percentage is a lot lower, how do you increase your chances of getting booked by doing all these little extra things?
Totally makes sense.
Tom, if I can say really quickly, Tom, you're so right in that when you're looking at your comp sets, you can see what their photos, reviews, things like that are. One of the things that, yes, we try and push for renovations during this lower period, but also we sort of do an internal renovations. We look at every one of our listings, every one of and how they appear. And you have to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, because a lot of people get used to, hey, it says COVID-19, here's how we clean. Well, if you lead with that, that's not, in a lot of places you look right now, it still says that, or we're closed. We're closed in 2022. Just reopened.
COVID. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So those are things that are helping us as well.
Yeah. I would love to add to that. Just anecdotally, I'm very passionate about the full path, the conversion path of how people make their purchasing decisions. And I think that there's an alignment to each customer that chooses the platform that they want to purchase on. And that's something that a lot of revenue managers, I don't think, take too much into consideration. They're so focused in pickup, they're so focused in the rates and the occupancy and what they're doing, that they fail to sometimes see, like, am I live and bookable? Can the thing be purchased? Is it there? And I think to answer, I think there was an anonymous question that came up in the Q&A about, Airbnb and the reduction of some of their product offerings they were doing, and saw a little bit of a decline and stuff. And you need to have your direct game sharp, because having all your eggs in one basket, some of those things, those purchasing decisions will change. And I think what I've seen is the price sensitivity of people are making them want to go look for other avenues to find stuff. I think John and I have talked about it in the past, but like, there's actual studies showing where people are saying, I've decided I'm going to go to this place. They find that that place is super expensive. So instead of saying, well, I'm not going to go to that place anymore, I'm not going to go on the trip, they go, oh, I'm going to go find somewhere else to go. And they find a cheaper place that aligns because their traveler intent is so high. So I think for us, it's a responsibility to really care for that conversion path a little bit on the front side too.
I think it's pretty interesting. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
John, one thing I notice, I'm really, I see a lot of different locations. Again, we go back to brand rate integrity. We all know we don't love those OTAs, right? But, the thing I see a lot of different competitors do is that they'll put aggregator rates in Airbnb and Vrbo that are pretty high. My belief, I don't believe in that really. I like them to be pretty close to the same as our website. Maybe there might be a variable of 3-4%. Because if you start putting them higher, realistically, you're going to have to be a revenue manager for all those different channels too. So you're looking at different price points, everything, and that could really dilute your overall rate strategy, because if you have a 12% aggregator in there for Airbnb, a 15% aggregator for Vrbo, and your website is 0%, you're really trying to manage different price points and different customers, which now your strategy is all over the place. So I kind of would encourage people to kind of look at that if they do have high aggregators in there.
I really agree with that. And I'll be interested to hear Doug's response. I'm a really big proponent that a lot of people, some of this is going to be different on your contract. Like sometimes PMs are eating the cost of commission, so you just can't sell on a channel. But aside from that, you shouldn't just assume all of these rate increases unless you already have optimized your occupancy. Like you don't need to control your channel distribution for your bottom line if you're not already optimized in the market or have like a property that's producing. If you've got a property, it's booked all the time, then yeah, you want to maybe decide maybe I can't make more top end revenue, but I can make more bottom end by controlling what books. But if you're not optimized or you're struggling with occupancy, then the top end revenue driving is going to be the most important, because at the end of the day, even though like booking.com is expensive, Expedia, they're maybe difficult to deal with, they are the most effective marketing channel that you have. And when Doug said, have your direct booking strategy in line, the goal isn't necessarily to just drive direct booking and spend a lot of money getting people to come to your website, but you need to have it there so that when people find you on a channel that they're going to go to booking.com and look, they'll go check your property if they really like it. And if they can find it, they may book it through you. You know what I mean? That's really, really important. I think, Doug, you've been talking to me about some really interesting things you guys have been doing in that regard, but I do think it's important to note that having a direct booking strategy doesn't just mean like spending a bunch of marketing dollars to get random people to come to your website. It means making sure that you have a presence, because people look at multiple channels. They're going to see the same property. They want to be able to find you in person. And in our space, oftentimes, I think that's really where your direct is coming from, is people finding you on an OTA and then deciding to book with you directly.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about, yes, you can put I agree with you, Tom, like you can put your aggregators up there to offset the costs and stuff. But to John's point, like if you have to be watching your velocity on those channels. And if you start seeing some dips and changes in velocity, like anything you should do, you should have some way to understand a trend line to know when you've impacted it in some way to change that. Was it self-inflicted, or was it actually macro or something else going on that space and what happened to it? And the direct strategy really needs to be like, if they can't find you if they can't decide to buy you on an OTA, there needs to be a catch-all to get everything else. Because as much as a lot of you guys out there hate the OTAs because there's a perception they're stealing your business or whatever it is, the reality is they are always going to have more SEO and SEM spend than we ever will combined. So let them do it, but then try to make sure you have a good catch-all for anything that comes in. And on top of it, we need to think about our post-marketing strategy. I think you said a little bit about that, Joel, and that's a strong thing. get those first time buyers and then take them and say, market to them going forward and say, come on back, stay with us. We'll give you a discount if you book direct next time, and like use that power. I know there's aliases on emails and stuff, but there's phone numbers, there's StayFi, there's all these other services you can do to try and generate that PII to help you. So I'm very passionate about it if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah. So we're getting to about 10 minutes left. I want to just go around the horn and ask, we've talked a little bit about the summer, really good conversation, a little bit about the fall, but, we're also getting into budgeting season. What is the revenue strategy and techniques you're proposing is for 2024 to your teams? Like, how do you think you're going to approach 2024? How are you convincing your teams that this is what we need to be doing? And what are some of the mechanics of that? And why don't we start with you, Joel, and then we'll, you guys can jump in.
Well, for 2024, I mean, who knows what to expect? Again, just like this past year, as I mentioned earlier, we are considerably ahead of last year, which was considerably ahead of the previous year. But then, so what I'm doing is I'm just not being overly aggressive on the rates. I know that'll surprise you, John, but John, I've had many conversations on this. But I do like the bird in the hand. Back to those Rolling Stones tickets. And so, but another thing that I am doing is I am paying much more attention to what wheelhouse numbers are compared to what I think. The other times what I do is I just take what was historically the information and go, okay, let's go close to that. I'm riding with the wheelhouse for a while and then looking a little more closely. But I think that's what's helped in the long term, definitely. In the short term, I'm getting more hands-on.
Awesome. Henry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, for forecasting 2024, we're starting to do it on the individual home level, but a lot of things are gonna be the same game plan as 2023. Basically just looking at supply changes from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, ADRs, pacing where we are now compared to same time last year. And then also looking at different economic factors that would affect travel. Like, I don't know if anyone's brought up student loans coming back. Student loans are coming back. The bulk of student loans are between the age 24, 25, and 34. And the average Airbnb guest is 24 to 35. So it's going to affect, demand a little bit there, just because we're catering to groups, especially in that area. And those groups, if they can't get, their extra buddy to join in because, you guys added expenses, inflation's through the roof. And when money supply, John, we talk about this on other calls. There's a lot of economic foresight coming in, and it's being conservative. We do have our goals, and then looking year over year, identifying the homes that really missed their goals and making adjustments to them. But it is really sticking out when people are searching. People buying the photos, reviews, and rate. We just had a home transition from like a regular 4-bed, 3-bath in Old Town, and we made it completely bachelorette style. And it's booked up now through April, which is crazy. And it kind of worried me because I was like, the price is too low. And then I looked and we're over double year over year. So I'm like, okay, they're going to be happy, especially for that home group.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think the renovation side, which is, we are the experts looking at this data and actually being able to provide that feedback, because style is really difficult, but like knowing like this is a segment that's really important. If you make these renovations, I think we can do this. Would love to see it if you guys actually did a case study on that, because that's like a fascinating thing that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. We say just the word renovation, but like actually looking at specific styles that you might market to. The other thing too, going into your kind of macro data, I've said this on a couple other things. The student loan thing is huge, but I think it's also important for people to realize people still think of millennials as really young. Millennials are the family age group now, and they hold the most amount of debt of any age group in the country. They're the only demographic where consumer spending has reduced in the last year, other than Gen Z, which is very, very young. They don't have a lot of money anyway. But if you are like a family beach spot and you're like, oh, you don't have to worry about the millennials, that might be your target market. You need to be aware that those people are going to be the most compressed in consumer spending in the next year.
And you can see that. Yeah,
yeah.
you can see that just with what people are spending on restaurants, recreational services, recreational goods. The rate is that has been increasing is actually starting. The rate is decreasing now and going towards more of a flat line. And overall, CPI for lodging is actually decreasing too. People are seeing that, you know, probably has something to do with supply and not as much travel, but taking those into account kind of helps you like see what's going to be happening in the future. So I like looking at those other factors too.
Henry, you told me about this last time we chatted. What's the place you go to get all that cool macro data from the Fed?
Fred, FRED.
FRED.
That's my favorite one. Yeah, it's all
tons
free.
Of macro data.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's the Federal Reserve of St. Louis has like a whole database that you can pull data from. So if you're trying to talk to owners about macro conditions, really, really cool. Look it up. Doug, what about your team? What are you guys looking at?
So we're taking a little bit of approach of looking at like what happened in 2023 to kind of dictate what we think. We're feeling that, at least I'm feeling that things in 2024 are going to be relatively, I think, flat to 2023. Some marginal opportunities for increase, but we're really leaning in on the projection and forecasting aspect, I think, to kind of guide the team. We're doing some kind of cool stuff with really looking at year-over-year performance in an automated way from the last 60 days to really dictate not only what the team is doing that's working in strategies, but also things that may not be working, to like lean into a little bit more of like what our capacity and what might be doing going forward. I think that's one of the things a lot of folks don't take into consideration in the aggregate of their business and revenue management, which is like, what's the aggregate of my capacity that I'm actually out there selling? And is it really too far ahead? Because then you know, to your point, John, you've made before, is like you self-inflict and almost artificially create your own booking windows by some of those negligence pieces.
What is the capacity calculations for anyone who doesn't know?
Capacity calculation would be of your available nights that are left for sale. What is your current published rate times that in an aggregate way so that you can understand the opportunity to which you're selling out there in the future. That guides you to know what you can possibly get. Because if you have goals or budgets that set it, say you have a budget for the month of $1 million, but your capacity is only $500,000, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to get to your budget.
The opposite's really important too, because it goes to that idea where, like, I talked to a lot of people this year where it's like, look, we added up your rates. This is your forecast. You can actually cut rates 20% and still be above your forecast because their capacity, the sum of all of their posted rates, is so much higher than what they're actually budgeting for. That's a huge signal when you're looking far in advance, when you get into Q1 and you have a summer market, is like, check your capacities. Make sure that you're just not pricing 3x your budget, especially if you're worried that the booking windows are going to be short and that rates might collapse. I think it's one of the easy things that you can do to just check your revenue strategy is just compare what you're forecasting or your expectations to what you're actually posting. A lot of people have a lot of room there. And, you know, just by, you know, you might be able to do significantly better just by cutting rates and making more money. Tom, what about your team? I know you've got so many examples that you can pull from. I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we do is we really take a deep dive of, you know, 2023. So we kind of do a full analysis. We look at each unit and what the rates were. We analyze what were the base rates started at and what did it actualize in for each month. So we kind of look at the booking windows. Did we miss out on potentially pricing it a little bit less, the 9120s, et cetera? And then have a full foundation of what we could have done better this year. And then we really look at, again, what everybody was talking about earlier, you know, the supply per unit, how much new supply is coming into the marketplace, how are we pacing currently, how are our base pricing for next year, you know, what percentage are we up? I know we talked about, we're seeing some nice increases for 2024. Can we continue with that increase? You know, some markets we have, are flat in occupancy, but up in rate. Some markets are slight up in occupancy, but down slight or, down in rate a little bit. So it just depends on the market, but just doing a full analysis of this year. So making sure you maximize your revenue and then set it up for next year with a real good budgeting and forecast for each month per unit.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So we're about at the end of time. I did want to end with one little question because both Tom and Henry have said it. You mentioned you look at like the supply increase. How do you actually relate that to your performance when making a budget for next year? Like, what do you actually multiply against each other? Or how do you take like, hey, supply is up 10%. That means I get to this point where I'm actually adjusting what I'm forecasting for next year. What is the math there that you're using and thinking about?
There's some different ways to weigh it. It's kind of somewhat at your discretion, but seeing the supply increase for me makes me and not as much of a demand increase makes me just say, hey, there is the writing on the wall. If we want to get booked up, we're going to need to be the most attractive further out. We want to capture that base business, and then also our ADRs, and then look into the fees and everything like that. I think that's something that we can get better going into 2024 in Arizona. I just looked at our cancellation windows and our percent of nights canceled, and year over year in Arizona is up quite significantly. And then the cancellation window is actually shorter, kind of backs up people shopping around. So that's another thing to take into consideration. You don't want to, even though if you get that premium rate far out, they might cancel in three weeks before their stay, and then all of a sudden you're scraping bottom barrel.
Awesome. Tom, any insights into that as well? From your side?
I'd probably take a little too long for that, but we really kind of look at the supply divided by demand, anticipated demand coming in for each bedroom type, location, and then subtract. We do some subtraction there, and then we look at if based on supply, we think we still can capture occupancy, but it'll have to be at a lower rate, to get that occupancy. So yeah, there's a lot of involvement there. Unfortunately, supply is not the revenue manager's best friend.
Yeah, it comes down to that difficult revenue management thing that you really just have to like work with a revenue manager on, which is we have a hunch about what we think is going to affect it, and then you use the math to develop kind of assumptions that are indexes that now you can use to generate the math from, but it's not like objectively true. You're building an assumption about like, this is how I'm going to relate supply to what we did last year, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So talk to other revenue managers when you come up with those little formulas on your own and just get some feedback. That's the key. You're like, hey, this is how I'm dealing with this. And someone will go, that's a great idea, I'm going to do it. Or they'll go, what? Awesome, guys. Well, really appreciate all your time today. This was a fantastic conversation. This will be up on our YouTube. For anyone still here, we really hope that you enjoyed this, and please share it around. Let other people know. We do this once a month, every 6 weeks. We'd love to have as many people on just listening. I know I don't get to too many of your questions, but feel free to reach out to us and chat, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Yes.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, John, for having us.
Bye, guys. Thanks,
Bye.
John.